Hi everyone, Mariusz here. Today we will talk about kettlebells. Here in Vietnam we don't have big selection of kettlebells. The quality is questionable, amount of options is very limited. What we can usually get is cast iron vinyl kettlebells. You can get in some places competition type kettlebells, and somewhere in between vinyl coated, that's probably steel. Not sure what's inside, but comparing the sizes and comparing the build of them, these non-competition type kettlebells are pretty much close to each other. So I want to tell you very shortly what are the differences for a regular user. I will not talk about the competition level athletes, I will not talk about advanced techniques. I will just tell you very shortly what are the main differences between these three, maybe four types of the kettlebells. If you can get cast iron kettlebells for the heavyweights, it's also possible. So what are the advantages? What are advantages between these two kettlebells? To describe precisely the differences between these kettlebells, for our purpose, I will focus on just main elements. That is, first of all, build, shape, and the weight distribution. With the competition kettlebells, each kettlebell looks very much the same. It has the same shape, it has the same diameter. The bulk will have the same size regardless of the weight, and the handle will have the same thickness, the same diameter for every weight. With the cast iron kettlebells, the shape of it and the size of it will depend on the weight. Smaller may have very small bulk and sometimes very large handle. With the bigger weights, obviously the bulk will be much larger, but also the thickness of the handle will be bigger, while with the competition kettlebells it's always the same size. The second element regarding the build is the weight distribution. With the competition kettlebells, because the shape is the same, the size is the same regardless of the weight, so oftentimes with the lighter kettlebells there is empty space inside, there is a hollow space, and the weight is rather placed closer to the handle. While with cast iron kettlebells, the weight usually tends to go further away from the handle. The diameter of the handle I have mentioned already, so with the competition kettlebells it doesn't change. With the cast iron kettlebells, as they go bigger and bigger, thickness of the handle will be larger, so it's harder to hold it. Although if you want to focus on building strength of the grip, they may be probably better. The second element to consider will be the technique. With the competition kettlebells, once you develop the technique, it doesn't have to change. With the non-competition type of kettlebells, as you progress through the weight, you will have to alter a little bit the technique. The technique matters when we go really for the technical movements. So we'll go clean, jerks, snatches, movements which typically require one hand. That's why with the competition kettlebells, for people who have a little bit bigger hands, it's sometimes challenging to fit both hands if you do double-handed swings and this kind of movements, simply because they are more designed for single hand use. You would rather use two kettlebells at the same time for the swing, clean, snatches and these things, rather than two hands. With the non-competition kettlebells, oftentimes the handle is much larger, so you can easier fit both hands. Now, when you start going through the technical movements like cleans, like snatches with non-competition kettlebells, you will right away feel more impact on the arm. As much as with the competition kettlebells, because the diameter is quite large of the bulk, so the impact, if any, is distributed more evenly between your forearm, between your biceps, shoulder, and here a little bit of the pecs. I will try to demonstrate. You can quite softly receive the kettlebell. Because the window is the same size, also your piercing is relatively easy, it doesn't have to change. While with non-competition kettlebells, the bulb is usually a little bit smaller and the weight tends to go further away, then it's more difficult to receive softly the kettlebell. If you go for things like clean, you will always struggle about placement of the kettlebell. It's smaller, then oftentimes the impact comes closer to the wrist, while with the competition kettlebells it goes further away and it's more evenly distributed. So the competition kettlebells put a little bit less stress on the wrist, while non-competition kettlebells, especially if they have this flat area which creates sort of edge here, if you get this on your forearm, and oftentimes you have no option because they are coming very close to the wrist, this is quite painful. For things like swings, they don't really differ that much except for the width of the grip. So if you want to do double hands and your hands are big, then competition kettlebell might be a little bit too narrow. Although if you release the pinky fingers, might be enough. With the non-competition kettlebells, sometimes or oftentimes they are a little bit wider, which makes it easier to hold with two hands. But as I mentioned, competition kettlebells are for the competition purpose. Then usually you would use one hand or two kettlebells at the same time, and then you work with each hand separately. Another element to consider with kettlebells are groined movements. These are movements where oftentimes the kettlebells are stationary on the floor. From this perspective, you need to look at the surface of the contact. With the competition kettlebells, you will have always flat bottom and quite wide area. So when standing on the floor, it's a lot more stable. Besides, the handles do not go out of the ball. While with the non-competition kettlebells, this area, if any, is much smaller, and sometimes the handle will go away from the bulb, which makes it a lot less stable and therefore also more dangerous. For movements like push-ups, dips, you don't want to have this falling together with your wrist on it. So from this perspective, competition kettlebells are a lot safer. If you think about using kettlebells at home, you may think of the floor protection. From this perspective, vinyl coated kettlebells may seem to be a little bit safer if you accidentally drop a kettlebell, and that happens quite normally. Then you may save a little bit of your floor if you opt for the vinyl. Now the last part of this video I want to mention are handles. With the handles, you want to have smooth surface but not too slippery. Smooth surface, especially when you go for the clean jerk snatches, when the kettlebell actually creates shear on the skin, then you want to have it smooth enough that it doesn't peel the skin off your hand. If you use chalk, you improve the grip, but still the handle is smooth enough that from the shearing against the skin, it doesn't peel off. While with these kettlebells, this is a lot harder. Usually the surface is not as smooth. Sometimes it's painted with some paint. For swings, it doesn't change much, but once you start going through the piercing movement through the window and the technical elements, you will notice right away the skin coming off from your hands. These kind of highly polished handles are, on the other hand, very slippery. Even if you use chalk, when your hands are getting sweaty, the chalk turns into a pancake. So you are having a hand full with the flour, and still kettlebell doesn't stay very strongly in your hand. That would be all. In the summary, I would usually suggest going for the competition kettlebells or proper iron cast coated non-competition kettlebells. I would stay away from the vinyl for safety reason, for the usability reason, for the comfort reason. Anyway, at the end of the day, this is your decision. Price also will probably be an important element. So make your mind, but know what you are buying. Thank you very much for watching.